Joel had always wanted a dog, but his mom always said no, and for good reason. As a child, she'd been badly bitten on the ankle by a golden retriever that had no business biting anyone, but it did. After that, dogs were banned in the house. Period. Joel grew up with that no echoing around him like an invisible collar around his neck. At 18, he broke that chain. He went to the city shelter, a sad-looking building that smelled like cheap disinfectant, and adopted a skinny, jittery hound with eyes that never stopped moving. He named him Hunter. A good name, simple and sharp, like a punch. The family's cabin was up in the mountains near Asheville, and the road there felt endless. Joel's car, a rusted-out Cavalier that coughed more than it drove, creaked at every turn. The house, when he got there, wasn't much more trustworthy. It had electricity and water, but it smelled like mold and forgotten years. The floor groaned when Hunter ran across the rooms, like it was complaining about being stepped on after so long in silence. Still, it was freedom. The first few days were a mix of kicked-up dust and happy barks. Joel cleaned while Hunter sniffed around. Joel patched a pipe with electrical tape, and Hunter dug a hole near the porch. At night, they curled up by the fireplace. The fire crackled and the rain tapped the roof like nervous fingers drumming. Joel finally felt like he had a home, but the mountains held secrets, and Hunter seemed to know. On the second night, the dog growled low, staring at the window. Joel turned off the lights and looked out. Nothing but trees, wind, and shadows. Still, Hunter wouldn't relax. The next morning, Joel found huge tracks in the mud near the porch. Wolf tracks, only bigger, way bigger. He tried to convince himself he was wrong, that mud plays tricks, that maybe it was just a deer. But the chill in his stomach wouldn't leave. On the third night, the howling began. Deep, long, coming from somewhere deep in the woods. They weren't normal wolf howls. They sounded like thunder. Hunter growled back, pacing, unable to stay still. Joel tried to ignore it, turned on an old radio, opened a can of beans, pretended it was just wind, just his imagination. But the sound never stopped. And then the scratching at the door started. Light at first, then heavier. Claws scraping wood like knives on bone. Hunter lunged at the door, barking like crazy. Joel, palms sweaty, grabbed the fire poker. His heart pounded so loud he could barely hear the rain anymore. The door shook under a hit, then another, and then it burst open with a bang, slamming against the wall. The thing that came in wasn't from this world. It had a wolf's body, but wrong. Huge, almost the size of a horse. Its dark fur was soaked, dripping. Its eyes glowed a sick yellow, lit from within like headlights from hell. The growl that came from its throat wasn't an animal sound. It was the sound of something broken, a nightmare echo. Hunter leaped at the monster, sinking his teeth into one of its legs. The beast lifted him and threw him against the wall like a toy. Joel screamed and swung the fire poker, but the creature was already coming for him. He was saved by the sudden flash of headlights, a police car pulling into the yard. An officer stepped out, gun in hand, shouting commands that no one could hear. The creature turned slowly, as if choosing between its prey. It chose the cop. The scream was far too short. The officer's throat split open under its fangs, blood spilling into the mud, mixing with the rain. Joel saw it and knew that if he stayed, he'd be next. He ran, dragged Hunter, still limping, threw him into the back seat and started the engine. The beast came after them. Joel yanked the wheel hard and hit the thing head-on. He felt the impact like crashing into a wall of flesh. But the creature didn't fall. Not really. He didn't look back. He just drove, faster and faster, until the city lights came into view. When he finally stopped, covered in blood and shaking, the police were already there. White flashlights blinded him. Voices shouted commands. Hands dragged him out. Cuffs snapped around his wrists. Joel tried to speak, tried to explain, but no one listened. A huge wolf, the size of a horse, he kept repeating, but the words sounded insane. The officer's body was never found. To the lawman, the only killer there was Joel. Hunter was taken away. Joel was thrown into a cold cell. And in the darkness of that cell, while he whispered to himself that it hadn't been him, he knew one thing for sure. There was something in those mountains. Something hungry that wasn't going to stop. The Myers siblings arrived early, before the sun cut through the low clouds while the town still smelled like dew and diesel. Steve was driving, fingers tapping on the wheel to a rhythm only he seemed to know. Joanna stared out the window. Wooden houses, garages with half-open doors, torn posters on a pole advertising a summer festival that might never happen. Asheville, Steve said, like it was a joke. Pretty town to die in. Joanna didn't answer. She wasn't in the mood. At the station, the heater made more noise than heat. The desk sergeant looked up slowly. He saw the badges, saw the tired faces, and decided he didn't want trouble. "Agents?" he asked. Steve gave a half smile, the kind that looked friendly and threatening at the same time. Joanna stepped forward. "We want the missing officer's report and access to the kid in the cell." The sergeant glanced side to side and went to find someone with authority. The sheriff showed up wearing a wrinkled shirt and 3 nights' worth of dark circles under his eyes. He reached out a hand. "Ugly case." Officer's name was McAuliffe. Good guy. He brought them into a meeting room with a chipped table and a coffee pot that looked like it had been brewed before God ever thought about resting on the 7th day. He handed them a thick file. Photos, reports, maps. Joanna flipped through slowly. Trampled mud. Deep scratches in the wood on the porch. A dark puddle the forensic tech had labeled significant blood. No body. Steve flipped faster, not liking what he saw. "Where's the rest?" "There is no rest," the sheriff said. "Just this, and a hysterical kid with his dog, talking about a giant wolf." "And the dog, where is it?" Joanna asked. "In the city pound. Hurt but alive." Her expression softened a little. Steve noticed. "Can we talk to the kid?" he asked. The sheriff led them down a long hallway, the floor scuffed from years of use. On the way, he tried selling the simple version. "We think the kid snapped, maybe drugs. Officer went to check on him, something went wrong. You know how it goes." Steve nodded. Joel was in a corner cell. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, and there was a scratch on his chin. Sitting on the concrete bench, he looked smaller than the photo on his driver's license. When he saw the badges, he stiffened. "I already told everything," Joel said. Joanna stepped up to the bars. "Tell it again." Her tone wasn't harsh, just firm. Joel told the story. The cabin, the tracks that were way too big, the howling, the door giving in like thin metal, the huge animal, the officer falling, the blood in the rain. His hands shook while he spoke, but his eyes didn't look away. Steve folded his arms and let the kid go all the way through, not interrupting. "The size of a horse?" Steve said when the silence settled. "Bigger than any wolf you've ever seen?" Joel bit his lip. "I know how it sounds, but I saw it." Joanna caught the little details lies usually forget. How Joel described the wet smell of the fur, how he pointed exactly where the door had split, how pale he turned, talking about the officer's throat. He didn't seem like a bad actor. He seemed like a kid who'd seen something no one should see. When they left the cell, Steve exhaled hard through puffed cheeks. Could be a black bear. People mix it up. Bear standing up, rain, bad lighting. Joanna shook her head. A bear tears. This thing cut clean. Cougar? Cougar doesn't bust down a wooden door that thick. They stood in silence for a moment. "Let's see the dog," Joanna said. The city pound was in a shed behind the town hall. Inside, it smelled like ammonia and damp fur. Hunter was in a metal kennel with the number 12 painted on crooked. When he saw Joanna, he lifted his head and slowly wagged his tail. He didn't bark, just stared, like he recognized a chance. Steve stepped up to the gate. "Hey there, buddy." The dog sniffed the air and pressed his nose against the mesh. He didn't look sick, just tired. One paw had a small cut, already cleaned and wrapped in a thin bandage. Other than that, he was fine. Joanna asked the staff for his file. The vet had written, "Minor injuries, no risk of infection. Cleared." The man added, "We thought it was worse when he came in, but it turned out to be just scratches. He's good to go." "And how exactly does he go?" Steve asked. "His owner's in jail." The staffer looked at them, then at the fake badges. He shrugged. "If you're feds and need the animal for the investigation, take him. Not common, but I've seen weirder." Joanna signed a release form. Minutes later, Hunter was walking out the door, steady on his feet, not limping. He stopped near her like he'd already picked a side. Back at the station, the sheriff wanted to know if they could wrap things up soon. Reporters have been calling since this morning. If it's just an animal, we'll call wildlife control. If it's something else, well, that's your call. Joanna was direct. Don't close anything, not yet. She asked for copies of everything, reports, photos, radio calls. She wanted the exact location of the cabin and a timeline of every call made that night. The sheriff didn't like it, but he gave in. You feds sure love your paperwork. Can I see the marks? She asked a staffer. Marks? From the officer's vehicle. If you brought the cruiser in. They had. The hood was dented on the right side. The windshield had a web of cracks. They'd taken photos of dark fur stuck to the metal. Joanna touched the edge of the dent and pulled her hand back like the steel was still hot. Not a bear, she said. Steve gave a short, humorless laugh. I was hoping for an easy morning. Outside, the sky was getting lighter. A cold wind rolled down from the mountains. Steve leaned on the car, looking out over the town. If this is what I think it is, it's gonna get ugly. Joanna tucked her hair behind her ear. And what is it you think it is? That it's not a bear. And that it's gonna rain again tonight. Let's go to the cabin, she said. I want to see the door, the floor, everything. Steve nodded. They got in the car. The engine sputtered at first, then started. Before they left, Joanna opened the case file and slid 2 photos into a hard plastic sleeve. One of the wrecked porch, and one of the prints in the mud, next to the forensics ruler. That help you believe? Steve asked casually. It helps me not forget. He smiled without showing his teeth. The road leading up to the cabin was narrow and full of curves, with tall trees leaning in like they were trying to block out the daylight. The car climbed slowly, jolting over potholes. Steve was behind the wheel, his face tense, eyes fixed ahead. Joanna had a folder of photos on her lap, but she wasn't looking at them. She was looking out the window, at the deep, dark green that seemed to be watching them back. Hunter was in the back seat. The dog lifted his head a few times, nose working nonstop. Every now and then he let out a low growl, like he remembered something that still lingered on that road. He doesn't like it here, Joanna said, without turning her head. No one should like it here, Steve replied. When the car stopped in front of the cabin, the place looked like it had been abandoned for years. The wooden boards were dark with moisture, the porch was collapsing, and the door hung crooked, held up by just one hinge. The wind moved the leaves on the ground, but the silence felt heavier than any sound. Steve got out first, hand on his weapon. Joanna followed close behind, flashlight in hand. Hunter climbed out, still limping, but went straight to the porch, his tail still, his nose nearly touching the ground. Inside the cabin, the smell was mold, wet wood, and old blood. The marks were everywhere, furniture dragged out of place, cracked wood, walls scratched as if something had tried to claw through them. Dark stains covered the floor, dried but still visible. Joanna crouched and ran her fingers along one of the scratches. The wood had been torn up like paper. Wasn't a bear, she said. Steve touched the damage on the door. The splinters pointed inward, not out. It got in easy, like it owned the place. Hunter growled, low and steady. He stood by the broken window, body stiff. Steve and Joanna looked at each other. Then they heard it, branches snapping outside, heavy like whole trees being shoved aside. Steve raised his gun, took a deep breath. Joanna flicked on her flashlight and pointed it toward the woods. Nothing but trees, too still. Hunter's growl grew louder. A shape darted past, too fast for the eye to follow. The sound came from the side of the cabin, claws scraping the wall. The wood creaked under the pressure. Steve moved to the window and raised his pistol, loaded with silver. The shape came again, this time closer. When it leapt toward the opening, he fired. The gunshot filled the room and the thing let out a growl that seemed to shake the air. But it didn't fall. The flashlight beam hit it, and Steve froze. Holy shit. His voice came out rough, almost a whisper. That's not a wolf. That can't be a wolf. The thing was massive. Its snout was too long, like it had been stretched by force. The fangs hung past its jaw, thick, sharp, gleaming with saliva. Its eyes burned yellow, locked on Steve, unblinking, empty of anything human. The body was a wall of dark fur, broad, way too tall, and every breath it took seemed to shake the air like wind. You seeing this, Joe? This bastard really is the size of a damn horse. Steve fired again, then again. The silver bullets hit, burned into the beast's flesh, but it didn't stop. Thick, dark blood dripped to the floor, but it didn't seem to slow it down. It moved slow, eyes fixed on its prey. The werewolf lunged at Steve, slamming him into the wall. The air rushed from his lungs and the gun hit the ground. He threw his arm up to block, but the fangs clamped down on his shoulder. The pain was instant, hot, spreading through his body like liquid fire. Joanna screamed his name, Steve. She dropped the flashlight, spun her body in a quick, almost cartwheel-like move across the floor, scattered with splinters, and grabbed the pistol in the same motion. Then she rolled over her shoulder and came up on her feet, gun aimed at the beast. 2 shots rang out. The first hit its wide shoulder. The second went straight into its left eye, making the monster let out a deafening howl and release Steve. The giant werewolf leapt through the window and vanished into the forest's darkness. The silence that followed was heavy. Steve slid down the wall, clutching the wound in his shoulder. Blood oozed through his fingers, hot and thick. Hunter came up beside him, nose pressed to his leg, body still on high alert. Joanna dropped to her knees, pressing her shirt against the bite. Silver didn't work, she said, her voice shaking. Steve closed his eyes for a moment, trying to hold back the pain. But when he opened them again, there was no cabin, no blood-stained floor. He was lying on a narrow bed with rough sheets, a flickering ceiling light above him. The sharp smell of mold and old cigarettes gave it away, a cheap roadside motel. But that wasn't what woke him. It was the noise, a constant, grating sound, like someone had left a chainsaw running through a speaker. He sat up, frowning. "What the hell is that, Joe?" His voice came out rough. Joanna, sitting in the armchair with a cold cup of coffee in her hand, looked up. "What? That noise, it's unbearable." Steve pressed his hands over his ears, trying to block it out, but it didn't stop. It just kept getting louder and louder. "Stevie, there's nothing." Joanna set the cup down, startled. Steve scanned the room until his eyes locked on the door, and then his vision opened. He saw inside the doorframe a mass of pale, tiny bodies chewing nonstop, their sharp jaws gnawing at invisible fibers. "Termites," Steve said. "Hundreds of them." "My God, Joe, I can see them. Every single one." The sight of those tiny insects devouring the wood made Steve's stomach turn. The room spun suddenly. He lost his balance and fell off the bed, hitting the floor hard. The noise vanished in an instant. "Stevie!" Joanna jumped up, coffee spilling from the cup onto the carpet. "I'm fine," Steve gasped. Lying there, the pain in his shoulder still burned. He reached for the nightstand to pull himself up, and the wood gave way with a dry crack, crushed under his fingers as if it were cardboard. He froze, breathing hard, staring at his own hand. Joanna stood in the room, the forgotten cup still trembling in her grip. "Stevie." He looked up at her, eyes wide. "Everything's different, Joe." His breathing was heavy. "I can feel it. I can see it. I can hear everything." For a second, Steve closed his eyes and pointed toward the window. "There's a man on the bench across the street. He's biting into a chocolate-frosted donut. I can smell it from here, like I'm the one eating it." Joanna just stood there, trying to understand. "And there are 2 old ladies talking 3 blocks from here." His voice was hoarse, strained. "I can hear them, like they're right here in the room." Hunter was lying in the corner of the room. When Steve moved, the dog lifted his head. This time he didn't growl, he just stared. The look in his eyes was recognition, like he was saying, "I know what you are now." Steve lowered his head, fists clenched. The air around him seemed to vibrate with this new, dangerous force. "If I turn into a werewolf, Joe, you're gonna have to kill me." She didn't answer. She just locked her sad eyes on her brother, and the 2 of them sat in silence, as if they already knew the fight wasn't just against the thing out there in the woods, but against time itself. Real quick before the full moon hits, have you subscribed yet? Because this channel doesn't run on silver bullets alone. We need your subscription to keep hunting these creatures. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, and help us keep the algorithm from ambushing us like a werewolf on a cloudy night. While Steve wrestled with his new senses, Joanna buried herself in the grimoires they'd carried since childhood. Leather-bound books with yellowed pages, filled with notes from their father and uncle. With every page she turned, her eyes grew harder. She found references to common werewolves, those cursed by a bite, killed with a silver stake to the heart. Creatures who suffered under every full moon, but still kept a trace of their humanity. If discovered early, before the first transformation, they could be cured through purification rituals. But after the first full moon, there was no way back. Then she found older notes, written in faded ink, almost erased by time. These didn't speak of the common ones. They spoke of the first. They were called Fenrirkind, children of Fenrir, the wolf of Norse myth. Beasts the size of horses, without human form, without mercy, only hunger and rage. They weren't cursed. They were the curse. Silver could wound them, but never kill them. Bullets could pierce, burn, but the beast would rise again. Only weapons forged with magic, forgotten rituals, or legendary artifacts could bring down a Fenrirkind. She stopped at a nearly illegible note written by their grandfather. If the Fenrirkind isn't killed before the first full moon, every human it has bitten will turn forever. Right below, in smaller handwriting, came the warning. Those bitten by a Fenrirkind share its essence. They gain heightened senses and strength before the full moon, but they're also tied to the beast's mind. If the moon rises full and the Fenrirkind still lives, there's no return. The human fades. What's left is only the wolf. Joanna closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deep, as if the weight of those words had sunk through the paper. When she looked up, Steve was staring at her. He didn't need to ask what she'd read. He already knew. In the motel room, the silence was broken only by the hum of the cheap air conditioner. Steve lay on the bed but didn't rest. The sheets clung to his sweat-soaked skin. The fever came in waves, burning his face first, then his back until he was shaking like he'd fallen into an ice bath. He turned from side to side, gasping. "Stevie?" Joanna asked, not lifting her eyes from the grimoire. "I'm fine," he said, but his voice was rough, cracking. He wasn't fine. His eyes glowed in the dark, brighter than they should have. Every sound outside exploded inside his skull. Tires on the road, a distant horn, even the flap of a crow's wings in the tree by the window. He sat up on the bed, muscles locked tight like his body no longer belonged to him. Hours later, after Joanna had fallen asleep over the books, Steve slipped out. The dog lifted his head, let out a low growl but didn't bark. Maybe he understood that whatever had just left that room wasn't his owner anymore. The night was thick with humidity. Steve moved quickly, silent. The smell of the woods hit him like a wave of iron and earth, laced with the sweet stench of fresh blood. A deer was drinking from the stream when Steve got close. He didn't think. He lunged at it with a speed that wasn't human. His hands closed around the animal's neck, and for a moment, it felt like he'd been born for this. The deer kicked and thrashed, panicked. Steve felt the life pouring from its body into his. Its heart beat out of rhythm, and Steve swore he could feel every beat inside his own chest. Just a little more pressure, one more second, and it would be over. But then he looked into its eyes. Big, dark, full of fear, human in a way. And Steve pulled back like he'd been punched. He let go suddenly. The deer stumbled away, crashing through the trees until it vanished. Steve dropped to his knees, chest heaving. His hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the hunger that had nearly taken over. He wiped his sweaty, mud-streaked face with one arm and whispered to himself, "I'm not that. Not yet." When he came back to the room, the sun was already lighting the window. Joanna was awake, sitting at the edge of the bed, the grimoire closed in her lap. She didn't ask anything. His condition said enough. "I can handle it," Steve said, voice rough, trying to smile. "It's not about handling it, Stevie," she replied. "It's about time." And time was now their worst enemy. Steve's body burned like a coal under the thin sheet. His eyes glowed even in the dead light of the bedside lamp. Hunter lay beside the bed, head on his paws, but one ear perked up at every breath his owner took. Joanna threw on her jacket, stuffed the clippings from the night before into her pocket and left. Watching her brother burn wasn't helping. She needed answers. The library sat on a corner made of dark brick, shadows from old trees slicing across its tall windows. Inside it smelled of dust, glue, and damp paper. The librarian, a tiny woman with jangling bracelets, pointed to the microfilm room and went back to her desk without a word. Good. Joanna sat down, pulled the first reel, and cranked the handle. Local fairs, school championships, campaign promises. She sped through it all. Then the patterns started pressing at her eyes. Reports of large animal attacks kept showing up in the same spots. A narrow bend in the road, the wooden bridge in the park, the mouth of a trail between two stone walls. She wrote down dates, moon phases, locations. 1947, a farmer found half a mile from his fence, boots still on, the rest scattered. 1953, a hunter with his rifle still in hand, eyes frozen on what the paper called the dark of the woods. 1978, the lined face of Eli Cooper, black wolf of the mountains, plays with those who wander in, runs circles, waits for his moment. Simple words, but they hurt to read. On a piece of notebook paper, Joanna sketched a rough map and marked each location. They formed an uneven circle, like old barbed wire. In the center, the densest part of the forest, restricted access, county warning signs, territory, den. Her phone buzzed in the bag, Ethan River on the screen. She picked up. Joanna? His voice was tired, low. I got your message about the Colt. Is it bad? It's bad. She didn't dress it up. I need it. Brief silence. Ethan wasn't one for small talk. Tell me. Joanna told him everything. The bite, the fever, Steve's senses going wild, the size of the thing, how Silver burned but wouldn't bring it down. She cut the story to the bone. On the other end, Ethan's breath grew heavier. How many bullets you got? Joanna asked. 1. Then that's it. 1 shot. If you miss, it's over. If I don't hit it, he said, voice steady now, I lose Stevie. Make it come to you. When it does, finish it. Where are you? Asheville. I'm 2 hours out. Meet me at the gas station on the east exit. Don't be late. The call dropped. Joanna stared at the screen for a second as if there were still help to pull from it. She pocketed the phone, printed the newspaper pages that mattered, returned the reel, and left. At the gas station on the east end of town, cold wind rolled down from the mountain, rustling faded pennants tied to the poles. Ethan pulled up an old pickup next to Pump 3. He had deep eye bags, a worn-out jacket, and a wooden case on the passenger seat. There was no hug. He opened the box. The Colt lay there on felt, looking like a piece of night itself. He lifted the weapon like he was handing over a burden. No warm-up, no test shot, he said. 1 bullet. Don't lose focus. Joanna took the Colt, heavy, right in her hand. The cylinder spun under her thumb. 1 loaded chamber. She took a deep breath. Thank you. Call me after. Ethan shut the empty box. And Joe, don't miss. She tucked the gun inside her coat and headed back to the road. The town passed by in silence until the cheap motel reappeared with its sign missing half the letters. In the room, Steve was sitting up, back against the headboard, a cup of water barely shaking in his hand. Hunter lay at his feet, alert. Well? Steve asked, voice rough. Joanna spread the map on the nightstand and laid out the clippings like a deck of cards. She pointed at the markings. These attacks go back to the 1940s. Always this circle. Same moon phase, same stretch of woods. It circles, teases, tests. When it decides, it kills. She tapped the center of the drawing. The den is here. The mouth of the ring is a narrow ravine. 2 stone walls. Shallow creek in the middle. A funnel. Steve traced the trail line with his finger. The tips were redder than they should have been, his nails thickening. He closed his hand and looked away. And the weapon? Joanna pulled the Colt from her coat and placed it on the bedspread. The metal seemed to pull the light of the room into it. Ethan confirmed it. Only the Colt can take down a Fenrir kind for good, and we've got one bullet. Steve inhaled like he needed to find new air. The room's stink was getting to him. His pupils gave off that yellow shine that didn't belong to a human. Then mark the spot. She grabbed a pen and drew a mark on the map. Here, east side. The trail drops and narrows into the choke point. From the top of this rock, I've got a clear shot at the mouth of the funnel. You go in first, draw it in behind you. Hunter follows a few yards back. He barks if it tries to cut around. I'll be up high. When you line it up, I shoot. Jaw, eye, base of the skull. Wherever you expose, I'll place the shot. And if you miss? She looked her brother in the eye like someone biting down on her own doubt hard enough to draw blood. I won't. Steve nodded once. Dry. He stood, tested the weight of his body like someone checking the frame of a new machine. The fever made him glow. He looked at his hands, and just for a second, saw the nails grow a little longer. He clenched his fists, locked his jaw. I'll run ahead, make noise, leave a trail, he'll follow me, you stay out of my line. And if he gets to you before I've got the shot? Joanna asked. I'll break free, he said, like it was nothing. Or you shoot anyway. Hunter got up and pressed his nose against Steve's leg. He didn't wag his tail. He just stood there steady, like he was saying, I'm going too. Joanna folded the map, tucked away the clippings, picked up the Colt. In the bathroom mirror, she caught a glimpse of her own face, hard with exhaustion. She walked back into the room. We head out at dusk, she said. Fading light helps hide my position. Wind's shifting east today. You take him head on, I'll be up high, downwind. If it goes bad, there's a side trail on the right. Leads to the old road. No dumb hero stuff. Steve gave a quick, awkward smile. You love me. I put up with you, she said, slipping the gun back inside her coat. And I save you. The plan was set. No romance, no slack. A stone funnel, one bullet, and time pushing from the wrong side. Hunter lay back down but didn't close his eyes. Steve rested his head on the pillow and took a deep breath, like he was trying to remember what it felt like to just be human. Joanna turned off the light and stood there for a second, listening to the buzz of the air conditioner. Then she opened the door. The mountain was waiting. The rest would happen there. Hold up. Wait. This is an important moment before the next scene. If you're always waiting to feel inspired before you start writing, you might spend your whole life stuck. What actually works is having the right tools. That's what the Idea Factory is. A creative toolbox you can open anytime you feel blocked. Instead of complicated formulas, you'll find simple prompts that spark strong, original ideas, the kind that are already born with a story's soul. In the first pinned comment, there's a free lesson showing you exactly how to use this method. If you feel like there are stories inside you but never know how to start, this is your map. Now grab your popcorn, because the showdown's only going to get worse from here. The sun was sinking slowly behind the trees, leaving the forest stained with a dirty red hue. The air was heavy, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant smoke, like someone had been burning leaves somewhere nearby. Steve zipped up his dark jacket all the way to the neck and paused for a moment. The wind was coming from the east. He took a deep breath. There was the smell of woods, moss, and still water. But something else too. Iron and flesh, hidden in the air, layered beneath it. And along with the scent came a pressure, a presence inside his head, whispering without words. Joanna opened the map one last time on the trunk lid. The paper was covered in markings, arrows, lines, a thick circle on the eastern side. She tapped her nail on the high point, the rocky elevation above the choke point. I stay here. If you run like we planned, it'll come through here. Hunter holds the flank if it tries to cut around. The escape trail's on this side. She folded the map, tucked it into her pocket and pulled the Colt. Checked the cylinder. One bullet. The dry click echoed louder than it should have. Hunter paced nearby, restless, nose low, tail stiff. Steve ran his hand through the dog's neck fur. Stick with me, partner. Just a little longer. They entered the woods as the last light faded. The tall canopies swallowed what was left of the day, and the ground went dark too soon. Steve's steps were steady, his body more alert than it had ever been. Every sound was amplified: the snap of a branch, the flutter of a bird. Hunter trotted a few yards behind, stopping now and then to sniff and let out a low growl. Joanna split off at the fork, climbing the ridge, vanishing quickly among the trees. Steve followed the narrow trail down toward the stone funnel. The pressure in his head grew stronger. Not words, but intentions. Surround, test, wait. He paused for a second, breath short. He wants to wear me down, he muttered. The first sign came as sound. A heavy branch cracked on the right, then another on the left. Steve spun, saw only shadows. Hunter barked, a deep sound that echoed through the woods. A blur darted through the trees, too fast to see clearly. Steve felt the mental scrape, like the creature was laughing at him, without a mouth. He ran faster, pushing his pace. Sweat ran down his face, the fever burning from the inside out. The ravine came into view, two walls of stone narrowing into a natural funnel. He entered. Behind him came the sound of heavy paws, kicking up dirt and stone. When the Fenrirkind appeared, it looked even bigger than Steve remembered. Its mouth was a tear lined with long, glinting fangs. Its dark fur rippled with every breath. Its eyes burned yellow, locked onto him. The impact hit like a moving car. Steve was slammed into the rock, air ripped from his lungs. He used his new strength to grip the creature by the shoulders, but its claws tore deep into his side. He felt his ribs ignite with pain, blood running hot. Hunter charged in with a furious bark, biting into the beast's back leg. The Fenrirkind spun and struck the dog with its claw. Hunter rolled across the ground, yelping. He got back on his feet, limping, but he didn't go down. Joanna had the Colt in hand, watching from the top of the ridge. She had a clear view, the monster over her brother. But the bullet was the only one. If she missed, there wouldn't be another chance, and they were too tangled. She lowered the weapon, heart pounding in her throat. Steve forced himself to breathe. He shoved the creature's chest with both arms, screamed, and broke free. He stumbled, legs heavy, but didn't stop. He ran deeper into the stone corridor. The monster came after him, growling. The fever surged. His vision dimmed at the edges. He looked down at his hands and saw the nails thickening, beginning to stretch. His body wanted to give in. He bit his lip until he tasted blood. Not now, he whispered to himself. The corridor tightened. The monster's steps hit the stone like a drumbeat. Steve kept running, stumbling, but pushing forward. Hunter followed behind, panting, growling, barking each time the Fenrirkind tried to lunge sideways. From above, Joanna followed every step. Her heart beat in sync with the shots she wasn't taking. The Colt felt heavier by the second. She waited for the moment, just one. Steve felt his body starting to give out. His ribs were burning, his shoulder throbbed, and the fever scorched from within. But the monster was behind him, trapped in the corridor, forced to follow. The plan was still on. They reached the end of the funnel alive. Steve placed his hand against the cold stone, breathing deep, every inch of him pulsing in pain. Hunter crouched beside him, his fur matted with blood, but his eyes steady. Joanna came down the slope fast, the Colt still tight in her grip. The Fenrirkind roared in the darkness behind them, stuck in the narrow trail, but not giving up. Night had already swallowed the forest whole. The wind slipped through the rocks of the ravine, making a low whistling sound, like the woods themselves were breathing with them. Joanna climbed back to the high point, the gun steady in her hand. The rise gave her the clean line of sight they'd marked on the map. The mouth of the corridor opened just a few meters below, the space narrow enough to force the beast into a straight path. Steve stood down below, chest heaving, blood still running down his side. Hunter held his spot on the side trail, alert, ready to block any sudden detour. The plan was simple, but simple didn't mean easy. The Fenrirkind moved forward slowly, filling the entire corridor. Its yellow eyes didn't blink. Its dark fur seemed to swallow the light. Steve could feel the pull from within, not just in the body but in the mind, like he was breathing with the beast. Like every muscle, Every heartbeat belonged to them both. The hunger burned hot in his gut, begging to let go, to bite, to tear. He took a deep breath, clenched his fists, holding it back. "Closer," he murmured. His voice came out raw. The thing came. Every step echoed off the stone, heavy, unstoppable. Steve stepped in, closing the distance. It was like two wolves staring at each other from inside the same body. One made of flesh, the other of thought. He locked up with the creature, chest to chest, grabbing its broad shoulders. Claws scraped past him, slashing coat and skin, but he didn't let go. He held on even as hot blood ran down his side. From above, Joanna held her breath. The Colt felt like lead in her hand. One bullet. Just one. The perfect moment had to be now, or not at all. Her arm trembled, but her eye stayed locked in. Steve shoved hard, shouted with a voice that sounded half human, half growl. "Now!" He dove to the side, dropping to the stone floor. Joanna fired. The sound of the Colt wasn't like any ordinary gunshot. It wasn't just a bang, it was a dry thunderclap, a crack that split the air in two. The bullet flew, punched through the beast's left eye, and tore out through the jaw. The blow snapped its head back with brutal force. The effect was immediate. No flinch, no struggle. The Fenrir kind dropped like a boulder, its massive body hitting the rock with a crash that shook the ground. Thick, dark blood pooled beneath it, but it didn't move again. Silver burned. The Colt killed. Steve lay on the ground, chest rising and falling, hands still smeared with his own blood. For a moment, the pull was gone. The noise in his head faded, like smoke blown off by the wind. The fever dropped suddenly, and the body was his again. He breathed deep. Once. Twice. Until he realized he could hear nothing but his own heartbeat. Hunter limped over to him and licked his bloodied arm. The dog's touch brought Steve fully back. He lifted his hand, ran it through Hunter's fur, breathing deep. "It's over," he said softly, barely above a whisper. Joanna came down the ridge fast. She holstered the Colt carefully, like it was made of glass. Kneeling beside her brother, she touched his neck with her fingers. The pulse was steady. "You're here," she said, and her voice cracked, but it held. Steve closed his eyes and let his head rest against the cold stone. "I'm here." They stayed like that for a moment, just breathing, just existing. The monster's body still lay a few feet ahead, massive and useless now, its eyes no longer glowing. Joanna stood first. She pulled the lighter from her pocket and flicked it on. The flame caught quickly on the thick fur, spreading heavy smoke. The smell was old meat and burnt oil. There was no spectacle, only the certainty that it wouldn't come back. Steve tried to stand, and Joanna helped him up, wrapping his arm over her shoulder. Hunter walked beside them, tail low but steady. They didn't stay to watch the flames eat everything. They took only what mattered. Notes, a piece of rock stained with blood, just enough to close Joel's case. The rest didn't matter anymore. They followed the side trail, just like they'd mapped it, each step heavy, but sure. The forest seemed quieter now, like it had lost its breath. By the time they reached the dirt road, the sky was already starting to lighten on the far horizon, announcing a new day. The sun was already high when they got back to the motel. The room still had that same bad smell as before, but somehow it felt like a different place. Steve lay down without a fight. The fever that had been burning for days was gone, like it had never been there. He was still sweating, but it was normal sweat now, not that furnace from within. He breathed deeply, his lungs opening without pain. The nails that had grown thick were back to normal. The world no longer screamed in his ears. Silence was just silence. Joanna sat beside the bed in the chair watching her brother sleep. His skin was still pale, but his face looked like himself again. When his eyes opened, they were just human eyes. He blinked slowly, like someone waking from a nightmare. "Is it over?" he asked. She nodded. "It's over." Steve closed his eyes again, breathing deep. "I heard it from the inside, Joe," he said softly. It was hunger, nothing else. Endless hunger. And for a moment, it felt like mine. She didn't answer. She just placed her hand on his arm and gave it a gentle squeeze. But it wasn't. You held on. Across town, The station was louder than when they'd first arrived. The sheriff, eyes sunken from lack of sleep, looked like a different man as he handed the folder of documents back to Joanna. "The kid's free," he said bluntly. "Evidence lines up. Tracks, fur, metal on the cruiser. Nothing a jury would make sense of, but enough to know it wasn't on him." Joel came out from the hallway with a tired-looking agent beside him. He was thin, hollow-eyed, but there was breath in his lungs again. When he saw Hunter, standing next to Steve, he stopped right in the middle of the lobby. The dog lifted his head and wagged his tail. There was no running, no excitement. Hunter just walked up, pressed his nose to Joel's leg, and stood there, quiet, like he was saying, "We're still together." Joel crouched down, ran his hand over the dog's ear. The tears came fast and short. "You came back," he murmured. Steve watched from a few steps back, arms crossed. His ribs still ached. The scratches still marked his skin, but he was human. And watching the dog return to the boy let something inside him finally let go. Later, on a street near the square, Joanna sat with Joel on a wooden bench. The map and clippings were folded on her lap. "There are things out there that don't have names in the papers," she said. "Monsters, curses, and sometimes they don't kill right away. They play, they test, that's what hurts the most." Joel looked at her like he was trying to believe, but he already did. "I saw it. You can't unsee it." Hunter lay at the boy's feet, calm, like life was finding its way back to normal. Steve showed up a little later, holding a bottle of water. He handed it to Joel and stayed standing, watching the two of them. "Having a dog's a lot of work," he said, his voice still a little rough. Joel gave a small smile. "I can handle it." Steve looked at Hunter, and for a moment it seemed like he was saying thank you. Back at the motel, Joanna placed the Colt back into its holster. The weapon was still there, heavy as ever, but now without a bullet. The one they had was used, no regrets. For her, there had never been a choice. Family came first. Steve was packing up the rest, stuffing wrinkled clothes into his bag. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of things that didn't need to be said. He zipped the bag closed and looked at his sister. "You didn't miss. There was no way I would." Her voice was steady. They walked out together, Hunter behind them, and headed to the car. The trunk opened with its usual tired creak. The weapons were stored, the folder with the clippings, the grimoire, everything in its place. Steve shut the trunk and looked at his sister. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The look said it all. They'd do it all over again if they had to. The car rolled onto the road, the engine hummed low and steady. The mountain was left behind, with its forest and its beast. The world moved on, but they weren't the same. Joanna drove, eyes fixed on the center line. Steve leaned his head against the window, letting the wind hit his face. Hunter slept in the back seat. The Colt rested in its holster, silent, empty. And just like that, they were gone. If you've made it this far, congratulations. Few people face the fury of a werewolf and live to tell the story. But Steve and Joanna know, when the blood dries, the real horror is usually just beginning. Because in their next investigation, the Myers siblings go up against something far more deceptive, an ancient presence, seductive and cruel, creatures that seem ripped from fairy tales, but they take people and return them changed. So let me ask you this. If someone in your family showed up years after disappearing, looking exactly the same as the day they vanished, would you trust them? Click the video on the side to keep the investigation going, and hit subscribe, because here, every episode doesn't just uncover what's been hidden, it shows you how to face what no one else believes is real.